On the morning of August 16, 1942, the U.S. Navy airship L-8 departed Treasure Island to patrol the San Francisco coast for Japanese submarines. With 2 trained pilots aboard, it should have been a routine mission to fly 30 miles out into the Pacific to the Farallon Islands before completing a round trip around San Francisco Bay. After responding to a suspicious sighting, however, the airship returned to land. It crashed in the middle of an intersection, with the balloon falling on a car. In a mysterious twist, its 2 crew members were not on board. They would never be found. In 1937, the Navy awarded Goodyear 2 separate contracts after taking notice of the airships built to advertise the Goodyear brand in the mid-1930s. From the initial design, Goodyear created the K-class airship and the smaller L-class airship specifically for the Navy. The L-class was based on the commercial model of airship they used for advertising and passenger transportation. The military versions of the aircraft would primarily be used for coastal patrols. The first airship, designated L-1, was delivered in April of 1938. It flew for the first time at the Navy's Lakehurst, New Jersey facility for dirigible balloons. The Navy also purchased some from Goodyear's original fleet of advertising blimps, including the L-8 and 4 other airships. The L-8 was then integrated to the Airship Patrol Squadron 32, the very first lighter-than-air squadron, created following the attack on Pearl Harbor. The L-8 or Love 8 airship was 150 feet long, similar to those used by Goodyear today. To stay in the air, it employed 123,000 cubic feet of helium, and to traverse the skies, it was powered by 2 Warner Super Scarab Type 5 engines with 145 horsepower. The airship could cruise at a speed of 43 knots. Goodyear's L-class airships were celebrated for being excellent flyers. In particular, L-8 had carried out 1,092 trips with minimal repairs and regular maintenance. Before its strange 1942 mission, it was thoroughly checked and found in excellent condition. The smaller airships were used for training at Lakehurst and Moffett Field, aside from coastal patrol missions. The Love 8 airship took off from Treasure Island, near San Francisco, at 6:03 a.m. on August 16, 1942. 27-year-old Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody was at the controls, with 34-year-old co-pilot Ensign Charles Adams to his side. The wind was blowing lightly at around 4 knots per hour, promising a sweet flight. They went up between 800 and 1,000 feet. Although the day was overcast, they had good visibility at 3 to 5 miles. They could even distinguish the towers of the Golden Gate Bridge. They flew over the Farallon Islands first, checking for Japanese submarines due to a reported sighting. They passed over the Golden Gate Bridge, and once they reached the island, they were to continue north to Point Reyes and then fly south along the coast of San Francisco. Their patrol would cover a 50-mile radius of the beach. About an hour and a half into the flight, Cody communicated with the flight controller after discovering what appeared to be an oil slick on the water. Oil slicks often served as signs that an enemy submarine might have been lurking under the surface. 4 minutes later, he sent a message that would serve as the last confirmed communication from either of the crew members with the base. He said, quote, "I'm investigating suspicious oil slick. Stand by." The crew members of Love 8 dropped 2 Mark IV float lights at 7:42 on the targeted area. The smoke-producing flare could help distinguish whether they were actually in the presence of a Japanese vessel. The smoke flares brought the blimp to the attention of Liberty cargo ship SS Albert Gallatin. The crew sounded their alarm and manned the guns in case a Japanese submarine indeed turned out. The blimp was spotted preparing a depth charge for an enemy submarine by nearby fishing vessel Daisy Gray, which had its nets pulled up in case of an incident. According to the fishing trawler's first mate, both crew members were visible in the blimp's gondola. While the L-8 identification was no longer on the balloon's outer envelope, the control cabin was still correctly labeled. Witnesses waited expectantly, but the L-8 dropped no bombs. Instead, the blimp engaged in somewhat strange behavior, The crew members of both the cargo ship and the fishing trawler observed as the blimp circled the area for about an hour at a low altitude of 200 to 300 feet. The blimp reportedly descended to 30 feet above the surface at one point. Cody and Adams wanted to take a close look at something in the water. To this day, it's still unclear what they actually saw. A few minutes past 9 in the morning, the L8 rose up once more and headed towards the city. Because the blimps had become a regular sight for residents, no one really suspected that anything might be amiss with the airship. Still, Cody and Adams were never heard from or seen after their coastal inspection. Because they made no further report regarding the potential oil slick, the flight controllers back at the base assumed that the men had either raised a false alarm or had resolved any potential issues stemming from their discovery. The blimp would then be seen again at about 10:49 by a Pan American Clipper pilot, who spotted it approaching the Golden Gate Bridge. While he did not pay close attention to whether the crew members were inside, he did not note anything worth worrying about. 10 minutes later, a sighting of the blimp was reported only 3 miles from the coast of Salada Beach, as it flew at around 2,000 feet. After that, the blimp started slowly descending, partially disappearing into the overcast sky. Shortly past noon, reports started coming in that the blimp was stuck on a cliff. It had gotten there after traveling 8 miles off course. It did not last long on the cliff, and after breaking free, it started its descent just a few miles south of the city. As the airship drifted past the shore, helium escaped, which made the balloon buckle and lose altitude rapidly. Onlookers watched in fear as it approached the middle of Daly City. Still, the remaining helium allowed for a considerably gentle landing at the intersection on Bellevue Avenue. The upturned gondola landed against a telephone pole with the engines directed at the ground. As the balloon deflated, it draped over a sedan whose owner had fled when the balloon headed in his direction. Around 2,000 people reportedly gathered at the scene immediately, watching as the balloon landed and ready to join first responders in case of an emergency. Plenty of neighbors left their houses to observe the crash landing. Local volunteer firefighters slashed up the covering of the blimp, afraid that the crew members were trapped. Only the gondola was left intact, but the men were not found. The police and military personnel soon arrived at the scene, but found an unexpected and alarming surprise. Neither of the crew members was on board or anywhere near the crash site. The senior aviator of Airship Patrol Squadron 32 was Lieutenant Ernest DeWitt Cody. He was a 1938 graduate from Annapolis who was known for staying calm and cool-headed under pressure. His commanding officer respected him as a capable problem-solving pilot. He was relatively new to flying blimps. He had only been made a naval airship aviator in December of 1941, which meant he'd been flying under the program for just 9 months. He entered service at Moffett Field in February of 1942 as Lieutenant Junior grade. By the time of the Ghost blimp trip, he had logged 765 hours of flight with one considerable achievement. In April of 1942, he'd taken the L8 to deliver valuable cargo to the USS Hornet for the Doolittle raid over Tokyo. At the time of that mission, Cody had managed to keep the L8 in steady position over the bobbing flight deck as crew members lowered hundreds of pounds in spare parts. His role in that mission played a significant part in his subsequent promotion to Lieutenant Senior grade. Although Lieutenant Cody was the senior-most crew member on the flight, he was 7 years younger than his co-pilot and passenger. Co-pilot Ensign Charles Adams had flown airships for 2,281 hours, giving him vastly more experience than his pilot had. Adams had piloted the air vessel type for 20 years and also participated in the Navy's rigid airship program. Furthermore, the 38-year-old co-pilot had played a role in rescuing passengers from the Hindenburg disaster, which gained him respect and celebration from the Germans. Despite his more considerable preparation, Adams had only gotten his commission the day before, making his first LTA patrol as an officer his last. The Navy investigated the situation to figure out what happened and where the crew ended up. Several eyewitnesses from ships, planes, and on the ground had spotted the airship close enough between 7 and 11 a.m. to see both Lieutenant Cody and co-pilot Adams inside the gondola. Many of these eyewitnesses reported that nothing seemed outside the parameters of normalcy. As for the airship, nothing seemed amiss. The throttles were idling, fuel was still found in the tanks, and the door to the cabin was open. Furthermore, the safety bar used to block the doorway was not in place. A microphone had been hooked to an outside speaker, which indicated they may have left the airship at their own free will. Cody's cap was found on the instrument panel, and 2 life jackets were missing. Still, regulations indicated that life jackets be worn after takeoff. The briefcase with secret codes was still locked and safely in its place. The fact that they had left the airship puzzled almost everyone. Moffett Field Commandant, Commander Donald Mackey, stated that against what happened, quote, "Staying with the airship has become a code of operational technique with the lighter-than-air men." Neither of the crew members were ever found, nor was there a conclusive reason for their absence. Theories soon arose, trying to explain the inexplicable. One suggested that perhaps they had noticed or believed something was wrong with the balloon, and that one of them had gone out to fix the issue, only to fall into the ocean. Under this theory, the second man may have attempted to help his crew member and fallen as well. Another theory speculated that they had indeed found an enemy submarine and had subsequently been captured. If this was the case, they were never found. A less popular theory, born from an unsubstantiated rumor, claimed that some sort of personal issue led one of them to throw the other out of the balloon. Some suggested perhaps a romantic triangle had been at the center of the problem. Under that theory, the second man would have fled the crash scene to avoid answering questions. That particular theory has been discounted, mostly because the hundreds of witnesses gathered to observe the balloon crash would have spotted a fleeing man. Whether any of these assumptions hold any truth may never be known. Coincidentally, whatever their fate was, another person was saved from it. Aviation machinist's mate Riley Hill was supposed to join their mission, but was ordered to stay for reasons that had not been shared with the public. The year following their disappearance, both crew members were declared legally dead. When the Second World War ended, several of the L-class blimps were sold by the government back to Goodyear, including the L-8 wreckage. Goodyear repaired the blimp and added it to its arsenal, now renamed America, to distance it from its strange history. The blimp went on to fly over millions of Americans at sporting events all over the country. Most of its spectators were unaware of the freak accident the balloon had been involved in. After serving in that capacity for the rest of its career, the Goodyear America was retired in 1982. The retired gondola was donated to the National Museum of Naval Aviation in Pensacola, Florida. It was restored and is currently displayed for museum goers.